The title of the show should be Play or Pray.
Jesus 911.
Eddie, you're absolutely right about that. I was talking with my wife this morning at breakfast, and we've read articles that right now, as a result of the lockdown, more people are praying. If you're a believer, believers are stepping up their prayer life, both Catholics and Protestants. If you're a non-believer, masturbation is up, and pornography, and drinking, and medical marijuana. So here's where you're at. Right now, as a result of this quarantine and lockdown, people are either praying more or playing more with themselves. So, I mean, that's the way it divides in this country right now.
Jess, it's very funny because the choice is clear. The choice is clear, but we're going to see how there are some things that might interfere with that if you allow it to. But always, just as we always say, if you're a state of grace, you're protected from these things. Amen. So let's get into this here.
You got it. The article's called "How to Keep the Devil Out of Your Head." Let me just start it here. It says, if the devil's the prime tempter, then keeping the devil out of your head is an important step to avoiding sin. So here's some suggestions. In today's troubled world, so many people have so many weird ideas about the family, gender, politics, money, etc. All of this stems from a very skewed and upside-down view of reality. It wasn't too long ago that good people could agree on what was good and what was evil. But nowadays, that doesn't seem to be true. And if that isn't bad enough, a lot of people really believe that you are full of hate if you dare to disagree with them, and they won't talk to you anymore. This is why Isaiah the prophet famously says in chapter 5, verse 20, he says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil." This prophecy of Isaiah seems to be very true today in this upside-down world in which we live. So why is this? Well, more than likely, crazy thinking is due to demonic tampering with our minds. I've heard that term before from Deborah Lipsky, former Satanist, now a Catholic. She calls it demonic thought tampering. It's the same thing that Liber Christo teaches. They teach it. They say they use the word a constant demons have a constant communication with the brain or the mind. So demons can and do put thoughts into our brain. In Eden, the devil told Adam and Eve that they ate forbidden fruit, then they would know right from, if they ate forbidden fruit, they would know right from wrong. This is a huge lie of Satan. As mortal sin only weakens the will, but also dims the intellect so that we do not know, we do not know right from wrong. And so this article that we're going to share with you has 6 areas of the mind. The person that wrote this article is obviously very steeped in Catholic thought, very in St. Thomas's view of the soul. So the human mind is a very complex thing, and it seems that our brains are comprised of the following hierarchy. Each one feeds into the next one. And by the way, this is the way the Liber Christo breaks it down as well. So this person, Ray Sullivan, obviously has bred St. Thomas. So here's the 6 parts of the brain, so to speak, as he says. But it's actually called the faculties of the soul. Number 1, he says the imaginations, emotions, memory, and conscience. Okay, those 4 are known as the four lower faculties of the soul, and demons have access to that. Okay. Now the next 2, Ray Sullivan writes, their intellect and the will. Those are called the higher faculties of the soul. Higher, lower. They're all the powers. Faculty means the power of the soul. The intellect and the will, the demon has no access to the intellect and will, the higher faculties or the higher powers of the soul. The demon does have access to the 4 lower faculties of the soul, which Ray Sullivan writes here, which he takes from St. Thomas. Imagination, emotions, memory, conscience. So, Eddie, Leia, let's take a look at these 6 areas and see how they act and react to demonic thought tampering.
Yeah, just it was very interesting. I didn't know before how one affects the others and how it can be a progression. So I think that's the important part of this article. So let's go there now. It says the imagination. This is the lowest form of the human mind, and it is the easiest one for the devil to influence. He can fill our minds with all sorts of images and ideas about sex, getting rich, revenge, etc. A lot of people do not control their imagination because it's usually a very pleasurable to think about fantasies. But the problem is that when the imagination feeds into one's emotions, then into the memory, then into the conscience, then into the intellect, and finally into the will. That's the danger of this. It says enjoyable fantasies somehow create false realities in our mind, which eventually lead to our trying to obtain gratification through pornography, fornication, embezzlement, crime, etc. And just, for us to have this idea, I remember at some point in my life, I said, well, if I win the lottery, I'll donate to the church, we'll help build it. But the fantasy of that is what we're talking about. The fantasy of the reality of the fantasy is what we're talking about. And it says, now that we're talking about the emotions now, the emotions. Next up the ladder of the mind are the emotions like happiness, sadness, anger. There is nothing inherently wrong with emotions. As even Jesus cried and got angry. But the problem is that if one lets an uncontrolled imagination with demonic tampering run wild, then the resultant emotions take over one's actions. This is why you see so many people getting angry over things that most sane people don't even understand. During the last election, there were people angrily yelling at the sky because their candidate, Hillary Clinton, lost. They are truly controlled by their misguided emotions.
Yeah, there's that famous video of that young Caucasian girl, kind of chubby. She falls down on her knees. She's got a beanie on. And when President Trump won, she started screaming and raised both hands up, her fists in the air, and closed her eyes, and she screamed. I mean, they play that on YouTube all the time. It's hilarious. I mean, how can people get so wrapped up in this, Eddie?
Yeah, Jess, and things are happening currently that really fit right into this category. My daughter, for example, is a senior in high school, and her senior year was cut in half, Jess. High school kids look forward to graduation, and this happens. And so, we're watching her, but, just as a family, we watch the Mass on Sunday, on Easter Sunday and all the Sundays of Lent. We gather around the table. We're a family. This is how you overcome what the devil can do to some of these kids, Jess.
That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, Eddie, the author Ray Sullivan talks about the first two ways that you can get in trouble. This because the demons have access to your imagination. It's called the lower faculty of the soul. The emotions, Eddie just shared that one also. That's also known as the lower faculty of the soul. Then the third one, he talks about the memory. The memory is also known as the lower faculty of the soul. The demons have access to that. It says here, Satan can use past events in our lives to attack us today. Most of us have sinned pretty badly in our past, but thanks to the sacrament of confession and divine mercy, we have been forgiven for those trespasses. But the devil never forgets anything we've ever done, and he can put a thought into our memory that we're still guilty of those sins. The devil will imply, God isn't merciful, and the devil will continue, and he's a stern judge. He declares you still guilty of looking at pornography, stealing, and lying. But in reality, God is not a judge now. God is not a judge now while we live. Rather, he's a merciful Father to us all before our death. After our death, he will judge us justly. But if we repent now and totally trust in him to save us, then the devil hasn't got a prayer. That was well written. Boy, Ray Sullivan knocked it out of the park with that. Yep. Again, the devil has access to our memories. That's the lower faculty of the soul. And that's why, Eddie, just the guys at Liber Christo, Father Ripperger and the staff, that's why they don't really recommend, and I get it now, I didn't before, but it makes sense. They don't recommend having somebody who was once possessed go back and give their testimony. They're saying because this is exactly the retelling of the story starts triggering their emotions, right. Starts triggering their imagination, and that it cements it in their memory, this event of being possessed or obsessed and stuff, and this once again gives the devil access or a foothold back into their life. And so the Father Ripperger says, don't tell your story once you've been healed.